Today we're talking about something we all want more of, happiness. But what exactly is it? How do we study it? And how do we get more of it? Today we're talking about Professor and Chair of Psychology, Jen Trevitt, who's going to help us make it make sense.
I hope.
Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Let's start with even this concept of happiness. Is that one big thing? Are there different types of happinesses?
I think there's a good argument that there's different kinds of happiness. Happiness as a word is not super specific, right? So I think we can all recall times that we would maybe describe ourselves as being happy, but we kind of felt very different. So there's the kind of like happiness where you had a good productive day and maybe a good dinner and now you're getting ready for bed and it's just that feeling of like contentment and like, okay, this is good. I'm happy. And then there's like today, like I was excited about coming here and having this conversation. Mm-hmm. And so that's another kind of happiness. Like if someone said, how are you feeling? I'd be like, I'm happy, I'm excited. So I think that, when we say happy, we actually can kind of mean slightly, they're all positive usually, but they can be like different flavors of positive.
Mm-hmm. And what is happening in our bodies, in our brains when we are feeling that positive feeling?
So lots of things. The kind of TLDR version is we have lots of neurochemicals all the time moving around. And the ones that are most strongly associated with happiness and different kind of states of happiness are serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, a little bit of norepinephrine for spice sometimes. And then we have kind of the other chemicals that are associated with kind of like not happiness. So like cortisol, things like that are usually when those are very high, especially for long periods of time, like usually that is not a happy time for us.
And are there other types of emotions that usually go with happiness?
Well, like excitement can be one of them, like you can be excited and maybe not happy, but you can also be excited and happy. You can be kind of relaxed and happy. So that's, I don't know if relaxed is like an emotion, but, chill, kind of just like, that can be associated with happiness as well. So, but in general, it's just kind of a positive, state of being.
Yeah. Some of us are watching that Netflix show Vladimir, which
I have not seen that
yet. Yeah, different opinions, but like with her, with the female character, it's like happiness is coming. This is like happiness of a new relationship. It's like coming with like energy, and creativity.
Yes. Yeah. So there's kind of like, if you really just want to kind of like break it down into easy categories, I could say maybe like there's like energetic happiness, which is maybe like the happiness of a new relationship or the happiness of a new project or kind of that anticipatory, excited feeling. And that's based a lot, like that's dopamine heavy happiness where it's novelty, it's challenge, anticipation, like I said. And then there's kind of like the more relaxed happiness, which maybe is like more like contentment, where we feel like satisfied, that kind of happiness.
And is there anything that what are the things people could do to inspire in their brain feelings of happiness if they don't automatically feel it?
Right. And most people don't. That's the thing, is that we're kind of born pessimists, right? Because that makes sense in terms of survival, right? So when we walk into like a new space or anything new, the first thing we're doing is we're scanning for threats. We are looking for the flies in the ointment. We are looking for the problems, right? Because that is going to determine whether or not we live for another 10 seconds, right? So, and that's the thing too, is that, we're an amazing species, but we're kind of like lizards with a few more bells and whistles, right? So especially like that emotional part of our brain, the limbic system, this is an ancient system. This predates us by so much, right? So we're really running on a very old operating system most of the time. Yeah. And so like, that lizard brain, this is why we lived beyond being lizards, is because we're really good at identifying threats and problems, and paying attention to them. Like they capture our attention like nothing else, right? And you see this like in news stories and social media posts and algorithms. Like the things that grab our eyes are the like, they don't want you to know this, or this could be, are you doing this thing that might kill you, and you're like, and they know that advertisers know this, and so we're kind of hardwired to detect the yuck, right? And so it's not that we don't notice the good stuff, but we do need to cultivate it a little bit more. We need to put a little bit more energy into noticing the things that are good, that are beneficial to us, that are going to, make us not just survive, but thrive kind of thing, right? And so that's what I teach in my classes is like, know who you are, because it's not your fault. Like, this kind of like everything's so negative. You are operating according to this program that has kept you alive. And so, but if we want to move beyond that, if we want to move into this area of, encouraging happiness, encouraging good feelings, then we need to put a little more effort into it. We need to pay attention. We need to seek out the goodness. And so like a class activity that I have them do is to, over the course of like a couple of days or something, is to give out 3 compliments per day. So and it can be to anyone, it can be to random strangers, it can be to, people and love, but they have to give out a compliment, write out what it was and how the person reacted to the compliment and how they felt after giving the compliment. And it's so interesting because most people love getting compliments. I was walking down the hallway on my way here and someone said, nice skirt. And I was like, thank you. I feel great. That makes me feel good, and but what's the interesting thing that they kind of start seeing after a while is that it makes them feel good. They feel good. And because this is an assignment and they have to do it, like they are looking for things to give compliments on, right? So they are looking for the good things that they can be like, hey, I like that, and that makes them pay more attention to the good stuff, and that makes them happier. And so I've had many students say that this really kind of changed just their attitude, and they were happier on the days that they did this. And so, and I share with them, like, this is a practice. Like, this is actually a practice that people use to increase happiness, is to make it a practice to give out, however many compliments per day or whatever.
Yeah. That's so interesting. My mom and I were just talking about how hard it is for us to take compliments. Like if somebody compliments me, like I always like come up with an excuse. Oh, I like that dress. Oh, really? I've had it since I was in high school. I got it on sale. I got it on sale, right? But she's like, oh, I have a new way of looking at it. Like it makes somebody else feel good to give a compliment. You need to receive that and accept it graciously instead of,
just a heartfelt thank you is enough. Like, thank you, and that, when I give someone a compliment and they say thank you with a big smile on their face, like that's very gratifying to me because I feel like, oh, I made your day a little bit better. So that's one tip, to look around and find the goodness and focus on it. Like, really look at it and take a breath, take a beat. You don't have to do a meditation or anything, but like, there's some very beautiful flowers right outside this window, and they're yellow and pretty in the sun, and like just taking a moment to kind of, oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, I like that.
Because our brains will immediately do that for the bad stuff. We don't. They will take care of that for us.
To train ourselves for the good stuff.
Exactly.
So I was hoping you could settle a debate between my husband and I.
I love
He's
that.
He's going to be watching.
All righty. I
lost one debate this weekend.
So you're coming back. You need to come back
strong. I have something called, he mocks me and calls it the stomach theory of happiness.
Oh,
and that
I
is
love it.
Like when my kids seem to be grumpy, my go-to is like, have you eaten? So tell me, is there a relationship between food, nutrition, and happiness? Do me a solid here.
100%.
Oh,
you are absolutely right. So we have this thing in psychology there's a theory called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it was very popular like back in the 60s and 70s, and there's issues with it, but it's still referenced quite a bit. And the basic premise is that, like, it's a pyramid where you have kind of the stuff on the bottom is like, safety and, basic needs are met. And then you kind of go up from there, and the pinnacle is like self-actualization, whatever that means, right? Living your best life. Mm-hmm. And the idea is, the basic premise is that, you cannot get to the top if the bottom is shaky. Like it's a layer. And so these things have to be in place first. And so when I teach about happiness, we often start, I tell my students, like, start at the bottom of the pyramid. And that's because, number one, oftentimes it's the stuff you actually have the most control over. So you can have more agency here. And second of all, you can't really do the top stuff unless that bottom is solid. And so on the bottom are things like, are we well hydrated? Mm-hmm. Are we fed well? Are we getting the nutrition that we need? Are we safe? And for us, we are a social species. And so safety usually means being, having others around us who are, interested in our well-being. Do we have basic things like shelter or whatever it is we, kind of like, these are our must-haves, but usually it's like, food, water, shelter, safety, sleep. Mm-hmm. Those are the big five. And if you can get those fairly well dialed in, then it's not necessarily, I would say, going to make you happy, but what it will do is make it easier for you to then become happy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if I don't know, like when I'm going to eat next, I don't have the bandwidth to look at the flowers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's just not even something I'm doing, because I am focusing more, I'm down in survival mode, right? And so when we're in survival mode, we don't have the time to kind of pay attention to the things that make us thrive, because that's not where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So, and nutrition in particular, I will say, has a really big impact on how we feel and also how we just think. Because so there's a nervous system that controls like the gut, basically, and it's called the enteric nervous system. And it's incredibly complex. It's often referred to as the second brain, because if there's no neural system that is as complex in the body aside from the brain. So the brain is the most complex neural system that we have, but the enteric nervous system is the second by a long shot. So if we look at, the kinds of cells that are contained in it, the kind of supporting cells that are there, the kind of neurochemicals that are being produced, it's very close to the level of complexity that we see in the brain. And there are big connections between the brain and the gut. And we used to think that, the main connection is called the vagus nerve. And we used to think that this was how like the brain kind of controlled the gut and monitored like digestion and nutrition and that kind of stuff. And then once we had the technology available to kind of not only trace the connection, but the direction in which the information was flowing, what was discovered was that most of that information is from the gut to the brain.
Fascinating.
Yeah, like 80% of that information is the gut telling the brain, here's what needs to happen. Here's how we're feeling. Here's the priority. And a lot of the chemicals like that we talked about, so like serotonin, for instance, which is very much associated with happy, especially kind of the more like calm, content varieties of happiness, 95% of it is produced in your gut. Yeah. And dopamine, like 50% of it is produced in your gut. Yeah. So these neurochemicals that are associated with like good moods and happiness and stuff, most of them are produced in the gut.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm like loving my theory of happiness.
Well, and you don't see a lot of like, so when you see things like depression or anxiety or things like that, almost every single time there are gut issues right alongside it. And some studies, this isn't necessarily, for all cases of like depression and anxiety, but there has been a lot of work showing that at least in some cases, if you can get the gut function back online through, like nutritional supplements and changes to diet and things like that, that the emotional aspects, the depression, the anxiety will resolve on their own with no direct, trying to like, modify it or, therapy or anything. Just all we're doing is targeting the gut function.
Yeah.
And if you can get the gut back online, lots of stuff resolves.
Huh.
I know.
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, you also often see sleep problems. So this is the triad. You see nutrition problems or gut problems, you see sleep problems, and you see emotional problems. They usually always go together.
But what about, how does exercise play into it? Because that's another standard piece of advice given to folks.
It absolutely is. And this does speak to that bottom of the pyramid. So moving our bodies is a huge part of maintaining our health. And in fact, there is a theory that kind of the whole purpose really of the brain, if we had to boil it down to like one, central thing that it does, it moves the body. That's what it does. That's why we have it, is because it moves our bodies, it makes us more efficient. And so we can, get the things we need and escape predation and all of our sensory systems and all of that stuff. This just helps us to navigate our environments more efficiently.
Yes.
And so moving the body is essentially a key component of brain health. If the brain exists to move the body and the body is not moving, the brain has no job.
Right.
And so moving the body is really important to just overall brain health. But also, moving the body increases serotonin, it increases dopamine, it increases endorphins, depending on how much you're moving it. So there's a lot to be gained by just movement.
Yeah.
If you want to really hack it, you want to move outside in the sunshine, which we're in the perfect climate for that. So we're lucky, and with other people that you care about.
Yeah.
So group exercise outdoors.
Perfect. Let's start talking about how one even studies this, right? Happiness can seem so subjective. What are the different ways that it can be studied?
Right. And so it is, you're right. There's that huge subjective component where it's like, what makes me happy doesn't necessarily make you happy. So there's always that portion of it that we see, when people are trying to study like happiness from like a biological perspective. What makes the subject happy? That's individual, right? So what we're usually trying to do is like, when a subject reports, I am happy, then we're going to measure like, okay, what parts of your brain are active? What parts are quiet? What are your neurochemical levels, maybe in different parts of the brain?
And this is done like paint a picture. So if you like the brain activity, how does one study?
So we have a wonderful technique called fMRI, which is functional magnetic resonance imaging. MRIs are kind of like CT scans, where it tells you about morphology of the brain, so you can like get a picture inside the skull. And it's much more finely detailed than like a CT or a PET scan is. So it's kind of nice like that way that you get to see like finer grain images. But functional MRI was really a game changer, because what this can show us is activity levels in different parts of the brain. And so, right, over time, right? And so we can have people, doing activities. I mean, obviously they're in an fMRI machine, so it's not like they can be, running a marathon, but they can like watch movies and you can literally track their brain activity and then, map it onto like what they were taking in the movie at that time. And so it's really, really interesting stuff. And that's where a lot of this information about kind of like what parts of the brain are more active when we're happy versus which parts are less active when we're happy.
Do we have one of those?
We do.
We have an
no, an fMRI? No, we do.
Okay. Do
No, there are actually very few of them. They're
really?
very expensive.
Okay.
Yes, and most often you're going to find them in like medical settings, because they're used to detect like brain damage and things like that.
Okay. And then how are we studying? Is it blood draws that show us the chemical levels?
You can do blood draws. They are not as great, because by the time it's in your circulatory system, like we don't really know, like we can't, and we also can't time map it the same way. So it's like all we can say is like, you were happy and you had, in general, higher levels of serotonin.
Yeah.
And then also, like a lot of these chemicals, especially things like dopamine and serotonin, they don't really survive the circulatory system because there are enzymes in there that break them down fairly quickly.
Okay.
And so a lot of what we know about kind of relative levels of neurochemicals have come from kind of more invasive Studies, oftentimes they're done with animals, which then again is very difficult when you're studying happiness because we don't know. We can't ask a rat, like, are you happy?
Yeah.
As I sample your brain chemistry. I mean, we can maybe guess based on behavior,
right.
but yeah, but sampling, like, so like using like a dialysis type situation where we're sampling, brain fluid in real time is very difficult to do with humans.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
What about the study you talked about where we're mapping the signals going back and forth between the gut and the brain?
So that is based on animal studies. That part of the nervous system is extremely well conserved in mammals. And so this is why we use animals in a lot of research studies like this, is because, these techniques are more invasive. And so you can't necessarily do this with humans.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are limits here.
There are.
Okay. So it seems like survey, like qualitative data.
Yeah, and so we can do things like, okay, so one of the things that we can do is we can kind of like piece it together. So let's say that we know that sitting in, like, so sunlight, for instance, sunlight increases serotonin. We do know this. And we know this from a variety of different sources, including animal studies, where it's like animals that are in the sun, they have more serotonin than animals that are not in the sun, right? We can also see this a little bit in humans as well. So we can look, for instance, like, so serotonin doesn't survive in the circulatory system, but we can measure its metabolites. And so we can say, like, okay, well, you have more metabolites, so we would assume that means that at some point you had way more serotonin, right? So we can do that. So we know, let's say, that sitting in the sun increases serotonin. So then what we can do is we can do a study where we have some people who spend a certain amount of time in the sun, for 14 days in a row or something like that, and another group that does not do that thing. And then we can measure their relative happiness, their subjective happiness after that time. And again, depending on how well designed our experiment is, ideally the only thing that's different between these two groups is how much time they have spent in the sun. And so if the sunlight group is like, yeah, my mood is a lot better, I feel better, things just seem to, not upset me as much, then we can conclude tentatively that increased serotonin, in this case via time in the sun, is associated with increased happiness. So we can, that's kind of how we get to it.
Yeah. Fascinating. What is the long-term impact of living a more happy life?
Great question. So there are real pluses to, like, because like I said, like, you kind of have to put in a little more effort, right? And so there is a cost in a way that you can kind of think of it that way. But there are real benefits to being more happy if you can do it. So one is you live longer. So people who are happier or report higher levels of happiness have lower levels of mortality from all causes, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's disease or accident or whatever, they just live longer. Do we understand exactly why? No, we don't. But, like, that is a correlation that's been demonstrated repeatedly in all sorts of different populations. Happier people tend to live longer. The other thing that I would argue is that we are better thinkers when we are happy, right? Which is important, especially in maybe, times like this where things are very uncertain and it's like it seems very overwhelming. When we are fearful, we tend to make fear-based decisions. And when we are fearful, like, the way that the nervous system is set up is that when we activate our sympathetic nervous system to a real high degree, that's kind of our fight or flight system. Yeah. One of the things that goes along with that is we shut down our frontal lobes. So when you're afraid, that part of your brain that is really clutch for helping you to, like, see the big picture, make a decision that's going to be beneficial in the short term and the long term, like all of those things, that part of our brain shuts down. We are in emergency mode. We are only thinking about the next 5 minutes, right? Like, tomorrow is tomorrow's problem, right? But that's not exactly a healthy way to make good decisions, right? Yeah. And so fear and happiness do not coexist well, right? So if you're afraid, you're probably not happy, and if you're happy, you're probably not terribly afraid, right?
Yes.
They don't coexist.
Yes.
And so I would argue that particularly in stressful times like this, really trying to increase your personal happiness is actually kind of a political statement. Like, it's saying, like, I am not going to be controlled by fear. I am not going to allow this fear mongering to make my decisions different than and it's hard. I mean, it's a real big ask, because, and I do acknowledge that, because like, it's tough to be happy sometimes these days. But I think that, like, that's what I come back to when I'm struggling to, find my happy place, and it doesn't seem like it exists anymore. And, but I think about it as like, this is my form of resistance. This is the way that I resist, is like, I will be happy, and I will try to spread that happiness to other people. And do my best to kind of push back against that, like, it's all ending, it's all terrible.
I think that's such a good point, because I think sometimes guilt comes with happiness.
It does.
Yeah.
No, it does. And I've experienced that. Like, people are like, you don't even care. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I do.
Yes.
I absolutely do care. This is me caring.
Yeah.
This is me caring. And then, I'll explain it to them, and then hopefully it makes a little bit more sense. But I understand that, because that is like a pushback where, my husband, for instance, is much more like the news reader, and like, he kind of like
spirals.
Right. But I'm like, okay, number one, not useful. Right? Not useful, because someone needs to make dinner tonight.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So come on, man. But also, like, this is my personal line of resistance. Like, this is how I'm going to resist it. Is it because, think about it, like, when everything is terrible and you feel terrible, it also just saps your motivation to do anything. It's learned helplessness. You know what I mean? Like, if the whole world is a dumpster fire and nothing is ever going to get better, why am I getting up today? Why am I doing my job today? Why am I making dinner for my kids today? You've got to have that hope. And I do think that, like, a lot of communities who, maybe have been marginalized or have suffered through these periods for a long time, like, when you read their stories, you see that spark, at least within their own communities and their communities of safety, that, like, there is joy and there is happiness and there is dancing and there is feasting. And that is important, because without that, there is no point in all of this. Right. So I think celebrating that is really important.
Love it. How did you become a psychology professor?
So I'm an alum, I should say that. Cool. I was an undergrad here, and I was in the grad program for a while, and I worked with a wonderful professor named Dr. Margaret White. And she was kind of my mentor, and all through, my graduate studies, I was her TA actually when I was here. And she was the biopsychology professor, and that was the course that I took. It was the spring of the year I was going to graduate, and I was like, where has this been my whole life? Like, my mind was just absolutely blown by this. This realization, like, everything is a chemical reaction. Oh my goodness. Like, it just changed the way I thought about everything. And I was so enthusiastic and thrilled, and she was awesome. And I would just go to her. I mean, now that I'm a professor, I'm like, oh my goodness, you were so patient with me, because I was so excited. And I would go to her office hours and just like, let's talk about this thing for an hour. And she was so gracious with me. Right? So anyways, she encouraged me, and, I wanted to go on into neuroscience, and I realized, like, I did not have any of the hard science background that I would need to be competitive. And so she's like, okay, how about this? Why don't you do a master's degree? And while you're doing that, pick up all of, the bio and the chem and the biochem and the anatomy and the neurophysiology and all the things you need. I was like, okay, excellent. So that's what I did. And then ultimately, I went on to a PhD in neuroscience, and she was like the person I called at 2:00 in the morning, where I was like, I hate this. I don't know why am I doing this, and she was awesome. And then I ended up getting a postdoc at UCI. And so I went to school at the University of Connecticut. And so I came back across the country to do my postdoc at UCI. And while I was there, she made the decision to retire. And she's like, they're doing a search for my replacement. And I really, really think that you should apply. And I had just gotten this grant from the NIH, and I was like in year 1 of a 3-year grant. I loved the research that I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't know, like, I'm happy. I'm not looking for a job. And she's like, okay. She's like, but you will be one day. And if anything, this is good practice. And so get it together and apply. And I was like, yes, Mom. And so I did.
Wow.
And I ultimately ended up getting the job.
Wow.
I know. And I have to say, like, it wasn't on my radar. Like, I really wasn't planning to go into academics. I was planning to go into pharma.
Oh.
Yeah, because that was, my degree was like neuroscience with an emphasis in pharmacology.
Okay.
And so that was kind of where I was headed. And I loved laboratory science, like bench science. I just, I was in my happy place, at the bench. And so I just thought, well, I'll try it and we'll see. And then I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with it. And this is why I know the universe delights in me, because it gives me things that I don't even know I want until I get them. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't imagine my life not being an educator. Like, it has been the best career I could have ever hoped for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it really shows the power of good mentorship.
It really does. Yeah, it really does. And it's been an inspiration to me throughout my career to be that mentor, to be that person for other people. Yeah.
Do we still offer that course, biopsychology?
I teach that course.
You
that
teach
is what I do.
Oh,
yes.
amazing.
This is where I talk about happiness and the pyramid and all the things. Yes.
Are there related courses too to biopsych?
We have a cognitive neuroscience class. So that's kind of looking more specifically at, how people think, and what are the physiological underpinnings of cognition. I teach a psychopharmacology course, which is looking at different types of drugs, both the, kind of prescription drugs like antidepressants and anxiety drugs, but also like illicit drugs, like, cocaine and heroin and things like that, and looking to see like, okay, what's the impact on the brain and how does this change the way people think and feel and, do those types of things. Yeah.
Actually, I mean, I think that raises a good question. Can I ask you another
Sure,
happiness
absolutely.
question? Because I think it's common for people to turn to drugs and alcohol to try to get to a happy place. Cost benefits of that decision?
So I think, like we have a bunch of different antidepressants of different, and they do kind of slightly different things. And I think that for a lot of people, these are game changers. They do come with side effects. Like that's, what I teach in my class. I'm like, nothing is free, right? And so there's always going to be a cost to taking a drug, whether it's an actual financial cost, like this is something you got to buy, repeatedly, or there's some other cost. So for instance, like some of the most common and popular antidepressants are the SSRIs, which stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And their main function is to increase levels of serotonin in the brain. And that usually increases people's contentment and happiness. A huge side effects of those drugs, and one of the reasons like a lot of people decide not to take it or discontinue it, is it decreases libido. It decreases sexual appetite, which makes total sense when you understand what serotonin does. Serotonin is contentment. Right. Serotonin is like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to eat more. I don't need to have more sex. I don't need more of this.
Yeah.
Dopamine is the molecule of more. Dopamine is the yes, please.
Yeah. What drugs emphasize
So
that?
we do have other antidepressants that are known as the tricyclics, and they increase serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. The problem with those drugs is that they can have some pretty serious cardiac effects because both dopamine and norepinephrine are also involved in cardiac function. So it may depend. So, but the good news is that if you're going that route, is that there you have so many the menu is large and deep. And so you can kind of search for the one that works for your specific physiology. It's not that everyone who takes a tricyclic is going to have heart problems. It's just that, we see it more than other kinds of drugs in people who maybe have a vulnerability to that. But if you don't, then that may be the choice for you, and that may work really well for you. Yeah.
And what about oh, go ahead.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is that, there's also, things that we can do if we know kind of the physiology of depression and kind of the neurochemical balance of depression, and if we understand that versus happiness, I mean, again, there are a lot of things that we can do that don't involve taking drugs. Like we can, move our bodies more. We can spend more time in the sunshine. We can spend more time with our friends, and people that we love and feel safe with. We can feed ourselves better food. We can make sure that we stay hydrated. Like all of these little things, when you add them up, they actually can have really powerful impacts on how we feel. And so I think that for myself and for people, in my circle who ask me about these things, that's always my advice is like, let's just start with the basics. Let's get the basics online and see if that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't make a difference or not enough of a difference, then we absolutely are going to go to the next step. But like, let's see if we can mitigate it with this, because this is, I'm not going to say easier because it requires lifestyle changes and those can be hard. But there's more variables in your control down here, and you can adjust it the way you want. And oftentimes there really aren't side effects. Like it's not going to crush your sex drive. It's not going to make you thirsty. It's not going to keep you up at night. Like, there are a lot that, so the common side effects that we see with medications that make people kind of like not want to take them, like you don't see that with these types of lifestyle changes.
Yeah.
So, but they are hard. I don't want to make it sound like it's like, oh, this is an easy fix.
Right.
It's not. I mean, changing your diet, dude, that is tough. But my real message is that it can really be worth it, though.
Yeah. Let's talk about the psych department.
Let's talk about the psych department.
You are the chair of the psych department.
I have the honor of representing the psych department.
What are you most excited about?
I am excited about we have such a large and varied faculty that I love that we have so many people doing so many interesting things. Just across the board with interest, and I love that we can offer so much to our students. Yeah. We can offer expertise in so many different areas to our students. I have children that are in college right now, and they are, in places that they have smaller departments, and we've been talking about, what's the pros and cons to a large department versus a small department. Yeah. And I think, with a large department, sometimes it's easy to feel lost. It's easy to feel, like you don't have necessarily the same professor for, multiple classes. But you might have different professors for every class you take. But the benefit is that it means you've got a lot of different expertise there, and you've got a lot of different people that you can talk to about things and a lot of different things to get involved in, like faculty research programs. You're not limited to like a handful. Like we've got, 30 people with really interesting research programs that you can become a part of. And I think that is really exciting.
What advice do you give to psych majors about how to best take advantage of their time here? What should they be doing?
So I think that it's good always to, get to know your professors if you can. I tell my own kids, the goal is that within the first 2 weeks, you have gone to the office hours of every single professor that you have and just introduced yourself, just so they know who you are, because again, it is easy to get lost. And sometimes I know they feel shy about it and they're like, I don't even know them. It's okay. It's our job. It is our job to welcome you and to, talk to you. And honestly, like, I know that oftentimes I sit in my office alone during office hours and I would love to have a chat with you. So don't feel shy. Come on in. So try to get to know your professors. I would also say, like, try to make connections within the department with your peers, so like in a class, get to know someone and exchange information so that if one of you misses class, you can get notes, or you can form a study group or something like that. If you can join a club and participate, at least a little bit. And again, it's one of those things where I know, we are all super busy and we do not have time. And it's like, if I am on this campus, it's because I am going to class and, I'm not just hanging out, with time to spare. But this is one of those places where I think a little bit of investment can really pay off in ways that you will be surprised. That feeling of connection, getting, involved in things, learning about different things that you may not have learned about if you hadn't been involved, and I think that actually can have a really, really positive impact, not only on your future, but on your current present time at this institution, So that's, I would encourage involvement. I would also encourage really good time management skills.
Yeah.
Because that's a tough one. I'm 57 now and I still struggle with that. So don't feel bad if you're, 22 and you're still like, it's okay. We get it. But that is something to work on.
One thing that makes psychology distinct in the college, I'm making sure, is this. I don't think any other department has as many faculty actively involved in inviting student research through labs. Can you tell us what is a psych lab? How could a student learn about them and join them?
Yes. So psychology, I think that a lot of students come into psychology kind of with the idea that they want to be on the practitioner side, right? So they wanted that, which is applied psychology. So it's taking all this information and then applying it to maybe change human behavior in one way or another. And that is a noble pursuit. But it also requires usually a great deal of additional schooling. So a graduate degree of some kind, maybe a master's degree, maybe a PhD or a PsyD, something like that, which, again, not everybody really wants to do that, especially after they've been in school for 4 or 5 years. The idea of I'm going to keep going for another 4 to 6 years. Yeah. It's so I think that sometimes what students don't necessarily recognize, and again, no shame, because why would they? The popular conception, in the popular consciousness of psychology is we are all therapists, right? But the truth is that the study of psychology, which is what the department is focused on, is the field of psychology. We are researchers. We are the evidence behind evidence-based practice. We are the ones gathering the data, analyzing the data, asking the questions, and then, creating the evidence that people are then going to use to take that out into the community and apply it. And that's really our focus at the undergraduate level, is the generation of evidence. So we're teaching you how to develop a hypothesis, how to design research to actually test that hypothesis, how to gather data that is going to be useful for testing that hypothesis, how to do statistics, how to present that information, both in, in oral as well as written form. That is really our focus at the undergraduate level, is teaching you how to be scientists.
Yeah.
And I think that that's actually a real strength of our major, because the skills that you're going to learn, data analysis, research design, communication skills, all of critical thinking skills, all of those things are highly transferable skills. You can take those anywhere.
Yep.
Right? And so that's a really nice thing, I think, about psychology, is that if something catches your fancy and you're like, oh, I want to go into early childhood education, or I want to go into, human resources, or you can take the skills you've learned and plop them right into that, and you are going to be a sought after candidate. Those are skills that employers are looking for.
Yes.
So I think that actually really is great about our major. But so we have, I think 30 faculty who have research programs, independent research programs, and they are all over the place. We have people looking at differences in education, in different communities. We have people who are looking at how we process language. We have people looking at sleeping behavior. We have people looking at nutrition. We have people looking at how cognition changes as we age and get older, so just so much stuff. We have people looking at eyewitness testimony and how that is affected by what they saw and when they saw it and the questions that they're being asked. Like, it's really interesting, fascinating stuff. So anyways, you can find that prospective students or interested students can find that on our webpage. If they go to the faculty page and look at the full-time faculty, off to the right-hand side, there's like a little bar where there's a place where you can click where it says research. And that is where, and I will say this, that we just kind of are in the process of we just switched and updated our webpage. It's not totally complete yet, so bear with us. If you click on this and it's empty, like I believe mine is right now, we're working on it. But hopefully by the beginning of fall, we'll have everything up there, and it will have the description of that faculty member's research, maybe things that they are interested in, like qualifications for their student assistant. So like, I would like you to have already passed elementary stats or something like that, as well as whether or not they are currently taking students into their labs.
Wow. Yeah. So our students have the opportunity potentially to work on original research with faculty?
We encourage that. Wow. We absolutely encourage student involvement. We value it very, very highly in our department. If you are doing work without students, we're kind of like, why? Why are you not including? Like, this is one of the things we ask all of our job candidates is, how do you plan to include students in your research? Tell us exactly what they'll be doing. And they could do all sorts of things. I mean, there's like kind of the standard like data entry kind of stuff. But like in the research group that I work with, we study fibromyalgia and chronic pain in older adults, and we do conferences. And so we have our student groups, like they are instrumental in arranging and putting on those conferences. They give presentations to the folks who attend about, what our data, that usually these are the folks who participate in our studies. And so we tell them, like, here's what the data is showing us. We give them individual report cards so they can kind of see where their data matches up to like the averages and stuff like that. We do workshops, and these are all student-led.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a great opportunity.
Yeah. And they present our findings at conferences and on papers and things like that. So yeah, no, we really like to include students in our research because we think this is a great, like, high impact practice of like mentorship and makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
About happiness, the chemical components, what we can do to elicit those chemical components in our lives, and about the psychology department.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.